Picture a British paratrooper in the dark just before dawn, June 1944, Normandy. He has jumped into hedgerow country with a map in his pocket and a rifle in his hands, and a strange baggy smock over everything he's wearing. Across that loose cloth are wide strokes of paint, green and brown dragged over a sand base, the Denison Smock. It can break up a man's outline, it can help him blend at a useful distance. But war is not a fashion show. On a battlefield you are rarely betrayed by colour alone. You are betrayed by a helmet shape, a hard shadow, a flash of shine, or one movement at the wrong moment. In this episode we treat the Denison as what it really was. Not a magical cloak, but an imperfect tool, one that worked when soldiers understood what it could hide, and what it never could. Chapter 1. Brushstrokes and baggy cloth. From 1941-1942 onward, the Denison Smock becomes closely tied to British airborne troops, not because it looks dramatic, but because airborne men had a practical problem. A paratrooper drops wearing webbing, straps, buckles and kit. On the way down, all of that can snag. After landing, the same gear can catch on branches and hedges. The Denison was built as an oversmock, a loose outer layer to go over battle dress and equipment. That looseness was not an accident. A tight jacket preserves the outline of shoulders and arms. A loose garment blurs the boundary. It changes the human geometry into something harder to read. Then the pattern adds a second layer. A sand base with green and brown disruptor strokes, what people now call a brushstroke style. Early wartime versions lean toward tones associated with warmer theatres. Later versions shift toward shades that sit better in northwest European terrain. But the Denison is not just a painted coat. It has features that make it unmistakably airborne. Most famously, a crotch flap, fastened under the body, meant to stop the smock riding up during a parachute descent. In North Africa, that flap earns a nickname. Locals call paratroopers men with tails. Some soldiers remove it, some let it hang, some keep it exactly as issued. And there is a quieter truth that never makes the recruitment poster. The smock could be windproof, but it was not waterproof. When it got wet and dirty, it could stink. It was a tool, not a luxury. Even production details point to something important. Some historians argue early Denisons show evidence of hand-applied strokes with large brushes. Others point to later runs as printed. Documentation is not always definitive. So the safest way to say it is this. Denisons did not look identical from one man to the next, and that variation was normal. They faded, they weathered, mud and sun changed the tones, and in some roles, especially where a soldier wanted to look less uniform, a worn Denison could appear less like military clothing, and more like an ordinary work garment. So when you look at this smock, do not think perfect camouflage. Think a big, loose outer skin designed for one violent job, to get a man out of the sky, onto the ground and into cover, before the enemy can understand what he is seeing. Chapter 2. What gives you away? Now we need to say the hard part out loud. Camouflage patterns are real, they can help, but they are only one part of being unseen. A wartime US field manual, FM 5 or 20, Camouflage Basic Principles, lays out 8 factors of recognition: position, shape, shadow, texture, colour, tone, movement, and shine. That list is not American, it is human eyesight, and it explains why the Denison could be effective, and still fail. Position is where you place yourself. If you stand on a skyline, you are visible. If you cross open ground, you are visible. No pattern fixes that. Shape is silhouette. The Denison helps here because it is loose, but shape is more than your torso. FM 5 Dupeng warns that the helmet outline is a striking characteristic, easily identified. And once you see that clean curve, your brain stops processing pattern and starts processing soldier. That is why airborne troops covered helmets, added scrim or hessian, and tried to break the curve. Shadow is the killer most people forget. Your pattern sits on your cloth. A shadow is a separate shape stamped onto the ground. In hedgerows, shadow can be messy and forgiving. In a street, shadow becomes a signature. Movement ruins almost everything. A brushstroke smock may blend into dappled leaf shadow until the moment you shift, turn, run, or rise. As a saying among snipers goes, you don't get spotted because of the pattern, you get spotted because of the mistake. Shine is the discipline problem that betrays you in a heartbeat. A helmet rim, a rifle barrel, a buckle, a mess tin, a watch face, even a wet patch of cloth can flash under the wrong angle. So here is the Denison lesson stated plainly. The smock can help break outline and soften a man's shape at medium ranges, but it cannot cancel shadow, movement and shine. And because it is loose, it comes with trade-offs. Loose cloth can snag, loose cloth can flap, loose cloth can advertise motion, so soldiers adapted. Some modified sleeves to keep them from billowing, some adjusted tabs, some cut and restitched, some added camouflage on top of camouflage. Let's make this practical. Imagine a simple test. Same background, same distance, same lighting. First, a patterned smock on its own. Second, that same smock under a clean helmet outline. Third, the same figure with one shiny surface catching light. Even if the pattern helps in the first shot, the helmet and the flash can ruin the second and third. Real camouflage is not a paint job. It is a discipline. A checklist you run in your head. Can my position be seen? Is my silhouette readable? Is my shadow sharp? Am I moving when eyes are watching? Is anything on me capable of flashing? The Denison does part of the work. The soldier has to do the rest. Chapter 3. Hedgerows and Brick. Now we test the Denison in the real world. Not in a catalogue. In two environments where British airborne fought, and where the same smock could feel like a strength, or like dead weight. Scene 1. Normandy, the hedgerow country. June 1944. British paratroopers land in Normandy's bocage. Thick hedgerows, sunken lanes, tangled branches, wet earth. At the moment of landing, colour is muted. In the first minutes, the Denison's biggest advantage is not the paint. It is the looseness that helps blur the human outline. And then Normandy teaches the deeper lesson fast. Hedgerows create broken backgrounds and uneven shadow. That can help a disruptive pattern. But the enemy does not need to appreciate your camouflage. He needs to detect you long enough to fire, or call fire. In hedgerow fighting, movement becomes the giveaway. A helmet crest above a hedge, a running figure between gaps, a flash of metal when someone turns. This is why soldiers looked for concealment beyond the smock. Captain Stephen Sykes, writing in mid-July 1944, describes work on sniper hoods and Hessian, testing a sniper suit in most exposed positions. That is not a hobby project. That is a unit saying, this smock is not enough when terrain stops helping us. The Denison becomes a base layer. It gives you a little more time before recognition, and sometimes a few seconds is the margin between being overlooked and being hit. Scene 2. Arnhem. When the environment changes the rules. September 1944. Operation Market Garden. Here's the honest disclaimer. Market Garden was not lost because of camouflage. It was lost because of operational realities, timing, distance, resistance, and the brutal difficulty of holding ground without relief. But Arnhem does show something perfect for our purpose. Environment can neutralize a pattern. In and around the Arnhem Bridge approaches, along long streets, open corners, and hard vertical lines, the world becomes grey brick, pale plaster, black windows, straight edges. Brushstrokes designed to dissolve into leaf shadow do not blend the same way. They can read as organic shapes against geometry, and the other recognition factors become even more dangerous. Position becomes easier to predict. Corners, windows, roots, choke points. Shadow becomes sharp in streets. Movement is harder to hide because resupply and repositioning are unavoidable, and shine can travel a long way down an urban sightline. So Arnhem reinforces the central point of this episode. Camouflage is never just the camo, it is the environment. A pattern that helps in foliage can lose much of its advantage in brick, and no pattern, no matter how iconic, can cancel the fundamentals of being seen. Outro. What the Denison really proved. It is easy to talk about the Denison Smock as a legend, and in a way, it is. Not because it was perfect, but because it was early. It was one of the first widely recognised attempts to disrupt a soldier's shape with a systematic pattern, paired with a loose cut that broke the human outline. After the war, brushstroke ideas appear again and again in other uniforms, and airborne troops held onto the Denison for decades, even as newer patterns arrived. Was it because it was always technically superior, or because it was theirs? Probably both. But if you want the real Denison lesson, it is this. You cannot hide a soldier with fabric alone. You hide him by hiding his behaviour, by controlling movement, killing shine, breaking silhouette, and choosing positions that do not betray themselves. The Denison did part of the job. The men who wore it had to do the rest. Thank you for listening. See you next time.